guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm Pugh with Pugh Team, and today I have with me John Stefano, who is not only an amazing commercial broker here in the Queen City, he is also the father of a child, Noah, who is 7 years old and living with autism spectrum disorder, similar to Finn Rory. And today we just kind of wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about our experiences living with a child on the spectrum. John, do you want to start and tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and your wins and your challenges?
Yeah, so I live in Noda in Charlotte, North Carolina, with my wife, who's very proudly Canadian. She'll tell you, that's the first thing you'll learn about her when she meets. She wants you to know that she's not American. That's the first thing that she'll tell you. So and then I live with my son Noah, who's 7, who's got autism, and with my daughter who's 4.
Noah is 7,
mm-hmm.
and he was diagnosed pretty early on, right?
So Noah was diagnosed, I want to say. So we knew. I think this is like all autism parents will tell you this. Something is amiss or something's going on. He was delayed verbally at around 3 years of age, and that's kind of when we started having some kind of idea that there was something going on. So what's nice about Charlotte and Mecklenburg County is that they have a really nice early intervention program, and we got him enrolled in early intervention, and that eventually feeded into CMS's Head Start program, or Bright Beginnings program. And we saw a tremendous amount of growth out of him when he was actually in pre-K. But the entire time he was at CMS, they said, well, we've really got to get him evaluated. They had the school psychologist look at him, and they were working with our doctors, and eventually, I think he was around 4 years old. He got a diagnosis. So, yeah. So
you feel like the language, or verbal communication was what signaled to you guys that there was something that was not neurotypical?
Yeah. So we would ask him really simple questions like, are you hungry? Are you thirsty? And he couldn't answer yes and no. He'd just go, and that was his answer for everything. So, that, I think that was the earliest indicator that, that there was something going. We initially thought maybe he couldn't hear. And then we kept on, exploring and going to doctors, and that eventually became the diagnosis.
So when I'm talking to parents that have children that are on the spectrum, I actually haven't had the opportunity, now that I think of it, it just came to me, to explore what's different between having a child on the spectrum versus a neurotypical child. And you also have a daughter, Lena?
Yeah, Lena.
Who is 4?
4.
And who is neurotypical. So how is that different for you?
I really want to admit my ignorance on this. When I first heard the word autism, I had no idea what autism was. Like, none. And I just assumed it was some kind of mental deficit, or I just didn't know anything about it. And I think the most important thing, or as a father, what I would really like, anyone to know about autism is that it's not a mental deficiency. It's not a, I guess you could say it is a delay, because in certain ways they're delayed, but they're just as smart and intelligent as anyone else, but they have sensitivity issues, neurological issues that prevent them from effectively communicating, or effectively combining, what they're seeing and feeling with the right outputs. So my daughter's 4 years old, and she's I think she might be more related to me than my wife, in that when I was in school, I was diagnosed with ADD, and she's very hyperactive. She's just got this incredible imagination, but what comes with that is all the extra activity, all the extra noise, all the extra. Whereas my son is very adverse to noise. He's very adverse.
If some of her rambunctiousness or neurotypicalness actually has an adverse effect on Noah, who may like his senses to be a little more dull.
Yes. Yeah. So Noah, I mean, he's much more introverted. He doesn't prefer, he likes his people. He's got his people. Like, he loves his auntie. He loves his dad. He's very affectionate, but he prefers to be in a book. That's what he prefers. And my daughter is just not like that. My daughter is talking, I mean, from the minute she wakes up to the minute she goes to bed, just nonstop. But that's how she is. Whereas because he has certain delays or impediments with communication, it's not something that he values. So he values, he does value other things. He really likes reading. He really likes, we let him, he's got encyclopedias about animals, and we let him watch BBC Planet Earth, and he just gets so completely wrapped up in that. He's really focused on his things that he could focus on without, having to utilize those, without needing to go into those, communicative, back and forth that other people, need. And he doesn't need it. So it's not important to him.
Yeah. No, I get that. And maybe if we're talking about autism, and it is a mystery, right? Like, we don't actually at this point know what causes autism, how internally they're feeling with things. But I know, that Finn and Rory, even though they both have autism, and they both have moderate to severe autism, and I think that they probably are lower functioning than Noah. There are certain things that Rory does that will have a draining effect on Finn, and vice versa. Like, if Finn is stimming, Rory will retreat and go into a very tight space, just to kind of self-regulate. And
Yeah.
when Rory cries, Finn, who is very much the lover and requires a person, if she cries, he feels it deeply, and he can have a 15-minute meltdown because his sister is upset. And without knowing, I have to imagine that he just is upset for her, right? But we don't know.
I've noticed that a lot of autistics are very they're empaths. Most of them are empaths, and they're very, if they see somebody who's hurting or feeling bad, there's like an instant identification with it, and they understand it, almost immediately. But my daughter, thank God, she's very compassionate. I think she tries to, and knows a lot of his what he understands what he needs, and so she always tries to help him. But all of the kids, the autistic kids, are different. I mean, I meet children that they won't eat specific foods. My son eats everything. I've heard of kids that they don't go to sleep, or they won't sleep through the night. Noah sleeps solidly. And then I've heard of kids
slept through the night.
Noah sleeps through the night,
Like,
and he
always slept through the night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very uncommon.
Yeah, and he sleeps hard. Like hard.
Anymore, you and I, we're not friends. I didn't sleep.
He sleeps hard. Yeah. So, but on the other hand, I've heard and read about autistics that are effective communicators, and my son is just not. He's not an effective communicator, and I don't think he ever will be. But by the way, that's okay. That's okay. Because he's going to have other things that he's really good at. I mean, we started exploring this idea that he might be hyperlexic. I don't know if you've ever heard of that term before, but it's when it's highly correlated with autism, and kids become hyper focused on letters and numbers and reading. And Noah, he will. I mean, he's probably got, and I'm not exaggerating this. He's probably got more than 200 books downstairs, and he'll sit down with a book and he'll read it over and over and over, or he will get me or his mother to read it over and over and over again until he has it memorized. Mm-hmm. And then he'll read it to himself. And he does that with every book he has. So, I mean, it's been, for example, it's been easier to teach him to read because that was his input. He liked hearing stories when he was a kid. I know that has something to do with his autism. He had to memorize them. And now he's an early functioning reader. But, and he could, he'll read a book and he'll read it out loud. But I could say, no, how was your day today? Couldn't tell me. Right. Could not tell me.
If there was, so I think I have two questions for you. And the first question would be, what do you think you have learned from raising a child on the spectrum? And then I think the second question would be, what would you want other people to know about children on the spectrum?
I love both those questions. It might sound brute, but my child is not dumb. Like there's a whole universe going on behind those eyes. Like he thinks the same way that we do. He, sees the same things we do. He experiences the world, not exactly the same we do, but we're there. It's just that his senses don't link up to his brain the same way that ours do. And that, I think, is the challenge. So, I think a lot of people equate he can't speak to, or he can't communicate to, he's dumb. And all I want as a father is for people to give my child a chance. And it's very frustrating to see that, for example, in the school system. And there are a lot of, and I mean, my son's probably had all of them, really fantastic school teachers. But unless you live with autism, you never really fully know it or understand it. And it does get frustrating and draining to be in a place where you're perpetually having to explain to someone, my son gets this. My son is capable.
So, John, if you had a piece of advice for a parent that suspects that their child is on the spectrum or has a child on the spectrum, what would that piece of advice be?
My advice would be that your child's diagnosis is just the beginning of the process. He or she, there will be a lot of work to do, and they've got their entire lives ahead of them. But you and I, we all we have to focus on what we're good at. And my son excels at and is good at a lot of things. Like, I can't focus on what he's not good at and what's going to hold him back. It doesn't do me good, and it doesn't do him any good. So I think my advice to anyone here who's hearing autism for the first time is, it's not static. We're not stuck in time. We're going to work through it together, either as another parent or with my child who's on the spectrum. But, with all our children, the only thing we can do is harness what they're best at and what they're good at. And ultimately, my goal for my son is his own happiness. And I think if he could feel good about who he is and what he's good at, he's ultimately going to be happy.
And I agree. We have to, even with neurotypical children, or neurotypical parents, they don't focus on what their child isn't good at. They focus on sports or piano or gymnastics or cheerleading. They put their focus on what their child is good at, and that's what we have to do as well.
It's the same thing. Yeah.
Well, John, thank you so much for sharing your story with my YouTube channel and with me. Like, I feel so fortunate to have you as part of my circle now, and I can't wait to see what magic we create for adults and children living on the spectrum in the future. I think we've got some plans in the works, and everyone stay tuned.